Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the English with Kirsty podcast, and today we're talking about business travel, and specifically business travel to countries where the language spoken is not your native language, because I think there are a lot of tips available about how to stay safe on business travel, but not so much one's thinking about the other issues that arise because you're speaking a different language all the time. Because I know that the first couple of times that I went to Germany and I was working and speaking and everything I was doing was in German, I was really tired at the end of it. My head was kind of buzzing with all these new words, and it was exhilarating, it was fun, but it was really tiring. And sometimes being really tired can affect your decisions as well. And sometimes I think it's difficult at the beginning to really be yourself in the other language, because for me some of my confidence comes from the fact that I'm able to say what I want, say what I think without having to struggle and look for words when I'm speaking English. But then obviously when you speak another language you don't have that immediately, so it makes you feel a bit vulnerable, I guess, because you're not as articulate as you would be in your native language. It can be a bit stressful. You may avoid some situations that you wouldn't avoid in your native language. Like if I remember a time when somebody was quite rude to me, I would have told him exactly what I thought of him in English, but when I was speaking German, and it was quite at the beginning, I walked away from a situation, and sometimes it is good to walk away, but sometimes you can try and avoid hassle in the other language when really it may be more in your own best interest to not go along with somebody if they're suggesting something that you don't want, or offering to help you when you don't really want them to help you. So I think it's sometimes harder, and it takes a while and it takes some practice before you can really be yourself in that other language. Some people have less of a problem with it than others, which is great for them. I did struggle with it at the beginning, and I think it's something to bear in mind if you are traveling for business, because things that you would just take for granted in your own country or where your own native language is spoken can suddenly feel a bit more like a task to complete, or something that's harder in another language. So we are going to talk about safety today, but we're also looking at it from the point of view of going on a business trip in a country where your native language isn't spoken and you're having to operate in another language. And also just a word about safety. I know some people think, oh, that's boring, and health and safety is seen as reasons for not doing things, for spoiling the fun. I'm coming at this as somebody who worked for a health and safety advisor in the past, and really what I learned there is it's just about, good practices that stop accidents from happening, or try to prevent accidents or bad things happening. So it's just things to keep you safe, because sometimes it's much easier to prevent something bad than to deal with the consequences afterwards. So these are just I think I've got 12 tips to help you to be safer on business travel in England or in an English speaking country. So in no specific order, they're not really grouped, but they're just things that I think people can be aware of. So the first thing is to learn about the culture. If you're in Europe and traveling to another European country, maybe the culture won't be that different, but still there are things that, etiquette about what's appropriate when you're with your colleagues. What are there any topics of conversation that you should avoid? Are there things that you shouldn't do when you're out and about? Just basic things. And you can't know everything. Nobody can know everything. But maybe just have a look online, see if you can find out some information. Maybe colleagues that have been to this country, especially if it's a country that's quite different from your own. It's worth just spending a bit of time finding out what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, because then you're less likely to do something that would cause people to take offence and may cause you to be in an uncomfortable situation. So Number one is, yeah, definitely find out a bit about the culture, especially if it's not the same as your own. Number two is about planning your routes, especially at night when it's dark or when there's less people around. Don't take risks in another country that you would never take in your own country or your own city. There's still, you may have had a really friendly and hospitable welcome, but that doesn't mean that everyone around you is good. You need to still take the same precautions that you would take in your own city, and that includes being safe. If it's late at night and you're going through like a deserted area, then take a taxi or get the bus. Don't walk everywhere if it's possibly not safe to do so, because you don't know this city. It's not your home city or town, and you don't know where the more dangerous areas are because you're not familiar with it. So think about maybe traveling with other colleagues if other colleagues are going in the same direction, or think about how you're going to get there. Don't just kind of hope for the best. It's good to, I would say, don't walk around with a paper map because you look a bit like a tourist and maybe more vulnerable. But if you don't rely completely on GPS, because you may be in an area where you can't get a phone signal, and then obviously your GPS isn't going to work unless, of course, you download a map that you can see offline. That's quite good. If you're not sure what the coverage will be, you can download a map and then just store it on your phone. Or also, have a paper map, but maybe go somewhere, I don't know, go into a coffee shop or a shop or something, so you're not just like standing around on the street with a map looking lost. And also, don't be afraid to change your plans if something happens that makes you not feel safe. So I wasn't abroad when this happened, but I was on a train and there was this really creepy guy trying to get closer than was necessary, and just saying some inappropriate things, and I didn't like this guy, and so I was going to walk from the station, but I didn't. I just got in a cab because there were licensed taxis at the station, and I thought, this guy is really creepy. And when I got into the taxi, the guy in the cab said that there was someone following me out of the station. At first he thought we were together, and then this man only stopped following me when I turned to go to the taxi rank. So that guy could have followed me home. That's not cool. So if you feel uncomfortable, don't be afraid to change your mind or to do something that brings you into an area where more people are, because people are less likely to be a problem if there are lots of witnesses who can see that. So go somewhere where there's like a shop with lots of people, or a busy train station or something. Stay where the people are if somebody's making you feel uncomfortable, even if that means you have to slightly change your plans for how you're going to get to the next place. But have an idea how you will get from A to B, and familiarise yourself with the area or the map a bit before you leave your hotel room or the place where you're working. Number 3, just a small thing, but like people, when you get your hotel room cards in the like a paper folder thing that has your room number on it, then don't leave that open. Just don't carry it around. Don't leave it anywhere where people can see the room number. They don't need to know what room you're in. Put it away safely. And also get a couple of room cards, because then people don't think that you're necessarily travelling on your own. You can always put another one, I don't know, in a pocket and one in your bag, so you've got both. But ask for 2, and then it looks as though you're with someone if you are travelling on your own. Number 4 is just any kind of signage around the hotel where you are. Obviously, a lot of the time it's just going to be a map to show you how to get out if there's a fire or if the hotel needs to be evacuated. But if there's any information that is in English, make sure you know what it says before you're panicking and trying to find out what it says. So if there's any kind of safety information in the room or in the hotel near the room, then just have a quick look at it at a time when you're relaxing and you have time, and not when there's some kind of emergency and you need to know what it says and you panic because it's not in your native language. Number 5 is be prepared to question people. If you might do that in your native language, it's okay. Like if somebody comes and says they're from room service, then did you order anything from room service? You don't have to let them in. They could be anyone. So especially when it's not your native language, you might think, oh, this is going to be hassle, it's easier just to go along with it. It's not. It's your room, and you don't have to let random people in, and it's perfectly reasonable to question them. Who are you? Why are you there? And even to call down to reception to say, did you send someone? Because if they didn't, that person's got no right to be there, and security can come and deal with them if they're pretending to be from room service and they're not. So it's perfectly fine to question people, and even if you are thinking, oh no, not another conversation in English, it's good to do it because it's your safety. It could be someone who shouldn't be there, especially if it's in the evening or later. You don't need to open the door to people if you don't think they are who they say they are, or they should be there. Number 6, just some basic medical stuff. Like if you need something, it's often easier to take it with you, because then you don't have to have the conversation about trying to get medication, or if you run out or something, just make sure you have what you need. Also some preventative things, like if you take something with you in case you get a stomachache, or in case you get a cold or flu. If you're travelling somewhere where the law is different to your country, then check that the things are legal that you're trying to take. And just learn some basic words to talk about any medical conditions that you have. I was going to come onto this a bit later, but if you need to explain something, if you have a condition that may flare up, or that there may be a problem, then just take some time to learn to talk about that in simple sentences in English, because then if you do need to speak to anybody, like a medical professional, then you'll be able to do that. You won't know every question that they'll ask you. You won't know necessarily the names for everything, but I think if you have a medical condition and you may need to speak to a doctor or somebody about it, then it's good just to know some basic phrases, to talk about it, to talk about the symptoms, to talk about any medication that you're already on, and then you'll feel more confident if you have to do that in a real life situation, because you've already practiced doing it in English. Okay, number 7 is just a basic one, really, about keeping your passport safe, taking copies of any important documents. So that's not really about language, but I thought I'd put it in here because a lot of people don't, and then they stress if they lose their passport, then they don't know the passport number. Make sure you know the number for the country that your own country. So like England is +44, Germany is +49. I know those because I use them regularly, but you don't necessarily know your own country number because you don't call it, but maybe you'll need to, so make sure you know what that is. Then number 8, sometimes you may need help, you may need to call for help, it might not be like a serious situation, you might just have got lost or something, but it's really important to take to make sure your phone is charged up, take a cable for your laptop to charge it, or even some of these extra additional battery power packs for phones, because you don't know when you'll need to contact someone, and it's more of a hassle if you are in another country. You don't necessarily know how things work. You may have questions about even the most basic of things because you're just not used to them, or maybe things are done in a slightly different way and you need to find out from someone. So always make sure that you have a way of contacting people. Number 9, this is also not a language related one, but I thought it was a good thing that I read a couple of days ago. When you're travelling, it's better to put your laptop in a bag in the under the seat in front of you on the plane than to put it in the head lockers, which is above you. You're not close to it. So in the overhead lockers, somebody could steal it, somebody could drop it from a height. Laptops don't like being dropped from that high. You're less in control of what happens to your things if they are above you. And obviously you can't do this everywhere, because if you're in the exit row, there are some rows where you can't do that. There's no seat in front of you. Like if you're in the front row, for example, there is no seat in front of you, so that's not possible. So that's your decision whether you want to sit there and have the extra legroom, or have somewhere to put your laptop that is a bit close to you. But if you do have the option, I always keep my laptop close to me rather than having it in the overhead locker where somebody could steal it or drop it or damage it in some way. Number 10, and this is kind of like what I was saying about the medical issues point, but for me, I don't really have that any issues that I need to talk about, but I do have allergies. So one of the first things that I learn when I go to another country is the word for the things that I'm allergic to and how to explain that in a restaurant, because it's important, because if I eat that, then I will probably have an allergic reaction, and mine isn't so serious that I'll end up in hospital, but it will be uncomfortable and unpleasant, and I don't want that. So I make a point of learning these words and the sentence like I'm allergic to, because there's a difference from like, oh, I don't want this in my food, to please don't give me this because I will have an allergic reaction. So just find out how to say the sentence like I have an allergy, I am allergic to, whatever it is, because that comes up if you can't read the menu, or all the ingredients are not always listed, so you need to say like, does this contain, is there any in this? Lots of things you can say, but it's important to know how to talk about that, because if the other person doesn't speak your language, you still need to communicate this idea that you can't have that particular food. So plan in advance, because it may be, people sometimes prepare food together with other ingredients, so the ingredient that you're allergic to may not be in your food, but it may be in the kitchen, and the people in the restaurant need to be aware of that if you do have an allergy. So being able to talk about that is important, and it's easier if you like plan that in advance rather than trying to find out how to say it when you're actually really hungry and you want some food. Don't work out in the gym alone or go swimming alone late at night. It's not worth it. You don't know who's going to come in, and you'll be on your own, so try to avoid doing that. Leave the do not disturb sign up even when you're out, because then people will think you're there and not attempt to come in if anyone has any bad intentions. Don't join Wi-Fi networks if you don't know what they are. Just don't think, oh look, there's Wi-Fi, I can use that. Especially in airports, people sometimes set up, criminals set up their own Wi-Fi hotspots that look like real ones, and then they can try and steal some of your data. So be aware, it's your work laptop, or even your personal laptop, but be aware. Don't just think, oh, free Wi-Fi, fabulous. Think, you don't know whose it is. Join one. There's usually something at the airport with a secure Wi-Fi connection with the password. Use the airport's one, even if you have to pay for it, rather than jumping onto somebody's one that they've set up that might not be secure. It's not worth it. It's your data. It's worth the couple of pounds or whatever it will cost to get you onto the airport Wi-Fi. Number 14 is really about accepting help, and this is language related, because sometimes people will offer you help and you'll just get a bad feeling. This happened to me a couple of times on the train, not a lot of the time, because I found some travelling around on my own, I've met some really interesting people, but there have been a couple of people and they just made me feel uncomfortable. And if somebody makes you feel like that, then there may be nothing in it, but there may be a reason why you're reacting like that. So I think sometimes these instinctive reactions are important. We don't listen to them enough. So just because you need help, it doesn't mean you need to accept the first offer of help. You can say that you're perfectly fine and yeah, you know where you're going and everything. Even if you don't, you can just walk off confidently in a direction away from the person who's making you feel uncomfortable, and then go and ask someone else. It doesn't mean that just because you need help or you want some directions that you need to take them from anyone who offers them, because if you don't want to if you don't want someone to escort you, you can say that you're fine, you know the way. Even if you don't know the way and you need to then go and check a map or check with someone else, don't feel obliged to take help from anyone who offers it. And also don't feel obliged to answer questions, because I think in language setup We teach children to answer questions. We teach adults to engage in conversation with people. But, sometimes you don't want to talk to people, or you certainly don't want to give them any information about you as an individual. Are you traveling alone? Why does somebody want to know that? Go away. We don't teach language students to tell people to go away, and I think sometimes we should. It doesn't have to be like that, but you can make up a colleague that if you feel uncomfortable with somebody asking if you're traveling alone, say that you're meeting a colleague, even if you aren't. Who cares? Okay, you may care if you don't want to lie, but if it's in the, I've done things like that. I said I was waiting for somebody when I wasn't, just because I wanted somebody to leave me alone, and I think that's okay. Let them think that a colleague is coming, or you're meeting someone, if you don't want them to be hanging around and annoying you, or just tell them to, it depends how confident you feel about asking people to leave you in peace. You're reading a book or something, I don't know. But the point here is that a lot of the time, we encourage people to answer questions and to get into conversations. But if you don't want to, the same as in your own native language, you don't have to. And you certainly don't have to answer questions about yourself or your plans if you don't feel comfortable doing that. Because really, it's none of anyone's business. And if it's a nice, genuine person, they will probably not ask those questions in the first place, and they will also understand if somebody is a bit wary about giving a lot of personal details out. Number 15, backpacks can be quite handy. I travel with them sometimes for carrying big things like laptops. I think it's easier carrying a laptop in a backpack than a laptop bag, but don't put your small valuables in the backpack, because it's really easy to open someone's backpack from behind. You can get locks for them, you can tie them so that they're real pain to undo. If you want, if you're traveling, you don't want people to be tampering with your backpack, because it's really easy in a crowded place. You can't necessarily feel someone doing that. So it's good to put your valuables in something that's more secure and closer to your body. And don't leave your handbag on another chair at the table. I was kind of surprised when I saw someone doing this, because I'm a London girl and I don't do that. I always keep my handbag really close. I usually wear a kind of an across the body one, so it's always attached to me. But a friend just kind of put her handbag on a chair, like not her chair, just another chair on the table. Anybody could have reached in or reached across and grabbed it, and she wouldn't have been able to stop them. So just be aware of where you're putting your handbag. Can you feel it? Sometimes I put it on the floor, but put my leg through the strap, so if anybody tries to move it, I will feel that against my legs and can do something about it before it's gone. So just be aware of your valuables and where they are. And really that's it. So that's 15 things. Some of them, as I said, are basic travel advice. Some of them are more specific to speaking another language that isn't your native language and operating in that language. And sometimes you may feel tired, and sometimes we don't make the best decisions when we're tired. But just to be aware of these things and to be aware of your own safety and what's good for you. You don't always have to be polite. You think, oh, it's rude to not answer these questions. It's not. If somebody shouldn't be asking them, then that's fine. You don't have to answer. And yeah, but basically these are all like the worst things that could happen. When I've been traveling on my own, I've met some really interesting and kind and helpful people, so I don't want to make it sound as if everyone's out to get you, but I am looking at that because this is an episode about travel safety. But generally I've had really good and positive experiences. The less positive experiences that I've had when travelling on my own have been in my own country, but then I do that more than travelling abroad on my own. But I think it's just always good to be aware, and I think sometimes people, when they travel, they kind of do things that they wouldn't do in their own city, or take risks that they wouldn't take otherwise. So it's just to be aware of that, and you don't know the places that the local people don't go to because they think they're more dangerous, because you're not a local person. So just be aware of what's happening around you. Don't take unnecessary risks, and have fun, because business travel can be tiring and annoying if you have a really busy schedule, but it can also be a really good way to get to know another culture, another country, to get to know your colleagues or customers a bit more, and it can be a lot of fun. But if you follow these steps, then it will help you to be safer as well. So I hope you found that useful. I will be doing a blog post on this topic at some point, so if you'd that will be in the newsletter. That the December newsletter is coming out soon, so if you've been listening to the podcast and you're not subscribed to the newsletter, you can sign up on the show notes page, which is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 116. And the newsletter contains links to other things on the English with Kirsty site that aren't in the podcast, and there's some extra resources for newsletter subscribers. And it only comes out once a month, so it's not going to fill up your inbox. It only comes out in the first week of every month. So that covers everything that happened on the site in the month before and that will be happening. So, sign up for that if you're interested, and have a good week and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.